Well, the reason I'm asking is we've just had this past week someone offer the town, well, has indicated they're taking a sizable parcel, number of parcels in size, and it's over, close to, a little over 90 acres of land that are, some of which are along the Winnetoxet. They're not obviously at Burridge Pond, they're down in South Halifax. And it may not be, it's obviously not specifically your program, but I believe there are programs possibly, depending on matching funds and such, that we may be trying to reach out to the state, but also some of the nonprofit conservancy foundations to see if there might be interest. The town itself might be interested in some of the land. We've looked at various times, for instance, we know eventually, because people keep dying, that we're going to run out of room at the cemetery, and we're going to need another parcel for that, for instance. It's not conservation land, but it may be that we can work, if there's interest by everybody or enough people to buy some of this land for both open space and for municipal purposes.
Yes.
Okay.
You kind of glanced at me when you said people keep dying. I was a little concerned about that. A little creepy.
He's good. We're all right.
No. How long is your term?
Another 3 months.
Close.
Plus 3 years.
But so, isn't there a land purchase grant program of some sort?
Oh, yeah, there are. And 90 acres?
90 acres, yeah.
Oh, that.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, and I know that the state has helped fund parcels with the town along the Winnetoxet before, and it may be good to be able, especially if this land is contiguous with those other parcels, we may be able to.
Yeah, and your open space plan
Yes.
now passes muster,
Yes.
so therefore you conceivably could qualify for matching
Right.
funds. And I know there are some other conservation entities that we work with a lot that were very interested in the Winnetoxet River in general.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that was it.
Oh,
I mean, I don't need any decisions or anything, I just wanted to let you know that
Yeah.
this, this may be coming down the pipe.
Can you email me a map or something?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. Well, do you want me to stay for further discussion of it?
No.
No, that was it.
That
We
was,
want you to get home safely. I know after a certain hour.
No, it's not a problem. All right, well, Charlie, I'll let's see, you'll certainly hear from me, well, before the appraisal is done, and keep me posted whatever information you need, but that is, the order of taking is our typical way we do acquire property, and you can see it's really only the first page that's relevant, but you can see
Look fine.
what the protections that the property will have.
Well, I have to say it's a breath of fresh air to deal with somebody from the state that is straightforward.
You've turned my attitude around.
See, you have a super fan, Joan.
No, this is why I come to meetings.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Well, it's been adversarial in the past,
Yes,
unnecessarily so.
Well,
Absolutely.
not so much adversarial as that we're the stepchild and they just didn't want to give us anything.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Right. And this was I mean, we're going to heal. That money's going to help us heal.
Those people are gone,
Yeah.
they retired.
Yes.
So,
Well,
no,
we-
we don't do things that way.
And thank you so much for all of your cooperation and for understanding our hesitation and letting us sort of do our
Absolutely.
rant
No,
before we said, sure.
All right.
All right.
All right, thanks, Joan.
Let me know.
Have a safe drive home.
Thank you.
speaking of the property, what this is that John Brew, who's a trustee for the Phyllis V. Sanborn Revocable Trust, is intending to sell 4 parcels of land. One is 64 acres, another's 9, another's 18, which has 2 buildings, including a house and a barn there. And I believe it's a builder's lot of 0.91 acres. All these properties are in 61A. So he has notified the board of selectmen. I'm not sure that he actually completed the work that he needed to do in notifying the other town departments. I did remind him that he needed to do that.
Yes, he did.
So I'm not sure if the clock is quite starting yet, but I've sent out a note to all the departments, saying, as usual, we're looking if anybody's interested. What I'd like to do is, as I mentioned earlier tonight, there are conservation and conservancy nonprofits in the area that I'd like to contact on behalf of the town to see if they are interested. I might try and put a placeholder article on for the town meeting just in case, because obviously funding is tight for any number of things, but we'll see what,
We have some wetlands money, don't we?
a little wetlands money there, yeah, would be one possibility. We can see what we've got and what we might need to put in if in fact the town's interested in making something happen. So we've got, the clock might start ticking around now, but we've actually got about 3 or 4 months at least, and to see if we want to have something happen. But so unless the board feels otherwise, that's my plan on that.
For now, I think it's good.
I think you're 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think we should go forward with that. It's 8.
8 o'clock, you're on.
Of course, yeah.
For the record, my name is Jack Coach. I'm the CEO for South Shore Community Action Council, and I feel privileged to be here to be able to share some information with you about South Shore Community Action and some of the benefits that the residents of Halifax have been able to receive directly from us. And so I gave you a handout that has some of the details related to that. And you can see, for example, that we were able to spend $287,194 this past fiscal year. Our fiscal year ends September 30th. And in this past year, we were able to put that amount of money directly towards residents of Halifax and a number of different programs. One of the largest ones that we have is the Live Heat program, low-income heat assistance for individuals, low-income individuals, and we were able to help approximately 350 residents, and they were able to receive approximately $150,000 towards their heating bills this past year. A typical resident would receive anywhere from, if they're at the poverty level, $1,100 to $1,400 maximum. Typically, they average around $800 per household. So it helps a little bit more than one fill-up. We have to be able to do that. Another program that we use, and that, by the way, those monies are paid directly to contractors. Another program that we have is weatherization, where we help weatherize people's homes, make them more energy efficient. Approximately 125 residents received this benefit this past year. The other thing that we do with this particular program is we'll repair or replace heating systems. Some of the heating systems that we have replaced this past year would have cost as much as $6,000 to $8,000, and we have to do that as well. Sometimes it's as limited as a cleaning, and sometimes it's a full replacement. You never know what you're going to run into, but we're more than happy to help with that as well. We have a volunteer income tax assistance program. We've only received about 18 residents this past year that benefited from that. It's a fully volunteer program where people come in, they can get their tax returns prepared by us free of charge. Last year we did approximately 600 tax returns.
Wow.
All done by volunteers. And so we're happy to do that, and if people are able to hear us now, I'm not sure if we're being taped. I would hope to see more residents be able to take advantage of this. It's a really great program. Just make an appointment, and we can set you up with somebody that will get them done for you very quickly.
And if they can't reach you, they can contact our council on aging because they work very closely with you to help the residents in
That
town.
would be great. That would be great. Very nice. I wanted to mention, we also have a very large food distribution center where over the past year, it's not funded by federal or state government at all. It's all money that we have to raise ourselves from foundations or from individuals giving us donations. This past year, we've grown that to where we sent out almost 600,000 pounds of food. That's the equivalent of about 500,000 meals that have gone out. And in Halifax, we distribute 152 pounds. Now, maybe that can be increased over the course of next year as well. We do have a food distribution center in Halifax that we bring food to, or they'll come and pick it up from our food resource center. And one of the programs that we have within that program is, in the summertime, we'll buy food from local farms, and so we'll be able to distribute healthy, perishable food
that's excellent.
as well. We love that program. We're happy to buy that food and as opposed to it being volunteered to us. So that's a great program as well, and we hope that we can get more of that food into Halifax as well. You see that there are other things that we've done here. I think the thing to emphasize is that we feel privileged to be able to do this and to be able to spend this amount of money on behalf of the residents. This is not administrative money packed into this. This is money that the residents actually receive that benefit.
That's huge, because in a lot of programs, that administrative money eats it up.
So the 287 is being spent on behalf of the residents here, and we're very pleased to be able to do that. We talked, the board and I talked this year about wanting to go around to all of the selectmen's meetings, let people know in the towns what we're doing, how much we're helping the residents. We're more than happy to do it. Hopefully it will get people to know more about us, our name, what we do, where we're located, and how to get in touch with us. So we're more than happy to have the numbers for Halifax increase. Next year I'll come back, I'll look to come back out to meet with you again and tell you what we're doing. One of the things that we did was we put in a petition, and we're hoping that you'll consider it to help fund the services that we do for the residents of Halifax. I'm more than happy to come to the town meeting and be available if people were to ask questions or want to know more about anything.
So you're talking about the article that you typically have at town meetings?
Yes.
So, yeah. We have it on the capital plan. I'm not, I know we've always been able to fund it. Things may be a little tight. We may have to tweak that number, but we're trying everything that we can to fund the normal amount that we normally.
Whatever amount we have to
The only thing on terms of coming to town meeting, and by all means you're welcome, I would hope that the town meeting would allow for you to speak, is we do lottery now for the articles. So all I can say is if you or somebody else comes, bring some knitting, bring the book to read, whatever else, unless you're genuinely interested in everything else that's happening there. Because outside the first 4 articles, which are basically the budget articles, from there on, it's random. You could be the first thing that comes up, you could be the last thing that comes up. And as much as I'd like to hope that we would do everything in one night, there are many times when we don't. So you may end up being there for the entire evening and then wind up having to come back the next night.
So what he's saying is you may want to reconsider that.
Yeah, I mean, usually, typically, one of us will present your article, but if you want to know what the funding that we're expecting to seek approval for, you can always call the Selectmen's office on Monday the 14th, and we'll let you know what we've decided to go in to town meeting.
One hopes even earlier than that.
Yeah, I've made a presentation each year for
Yeah.
the past millennia.
Good. Sounds great.
Thank you so much.
And for that matter, if the Finance Committee for some reason wants to invite you to come in and talk with them about the article, I know we're getting 3 or 4 of these type of articles this year, and the Finance Committee may ask for everybody to come in. Again, as Kim pointed out, it seems weird that as much as the economy is doing fairly well, but for a number of reasons, we're in a tighter fiscal climate here, specifically in Halifax, than we have been in previous years. So we're going to have some tough decisions to make. So
We put it in with a specific number, but
Yeah.
with the intention that whatever you can afford is what we'd be happy with. The other thing is, I wanted to make sure that you knew that if you would like me to be there and eligible or available to answer questions, we're more than happy to do that.
We appreciate that.
Well, it's nice to know you'll be available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for coming in and your work.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Okay, let's see what we got. Dog park. There's been an informal group of town residents who have been looking at the possibility of getting a dog park established here in Halifax. It's not a formal committee. They've not said, we just want to look at this one parcel or anything like that. But there is a grant program through the Stanton Foundation that would help fund first the design component of this and then also construction.
Are they going to become a 501c?
I don't know the money would go through the town for this.
Well, I'm just thinking about how we've done hops, is that we've had the Friends of Hops as a separate.
Well, I don't know what they want to do. I don't know
Okay.
if they want it to be, in essence, a town committee, and or if they want to raise funds on their own, but then divert the funds to the town. They're not there, but I think Sue Vogt had contacted me about this last week and asked about the possibility of having an article at town meeting. What I've done, there may be in your mail.
I think what she's doing is she did get what the wording and she's going to bring it in.
Okay, so basically it's to see if the town vote to approve the use of property, not a specific property, but use of property owned by the town of Halifax for a dog park, subject to approval by the board of selectmen for the use of any particular property. That way, the board has jurisdiction over this, subject to obtaining any necessary permits from agencies and departments of the town and Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that no town funds shall be used for hard construction costs of such a facility, and the facility shall be built only if private donations in an amount equal to 10% of the hard construction costs are received. The town shall provide maintenance of the facility if volunteer organizations fail to provide maintenance or take any
Okay,
other
you
action.
lost me on that line.
Yeah, that was
Well,
And you lost me at that
That's
line
the loser
because
clause.
even the HOPS people
Right.
are committed to continuing fundraising for maintenance of the facility. So you had me until the last line.
But that's good. I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's a requirement from the Stanton Foundation, that if
Okay.
the town is interested in moving along on this, that eventually, if we do build it, we're going to, not that, obviously we can hope that a volunteer organization exists that will provide the funding for maintenance, but long-term, we're going to be here probably longer than the volunteer organization.
Yes, and for that, I cannot support that. Just because, it's not that I don't like the concept, it's not that I don't like dogs, it's not that I don't think it would benefit the residents, but we are struggling to provide the services that we provide. And to add something else to the town and having to support it, it's a commitment of maintenance of another thing. And I think people will think it's a great idea, but when we look at this year's budget, and we had this long discussion last night, we don't have a penny to add to any kind of maintenance for something.
And also, as why I was very specific about the hard construction costs is that the Stanton Foundation won't come up with the soft construction costs. So for instance, if we need legal work done, as an example,
Right.
then we're going to have to,
Come out of pocket.
it's out of our pocket.
I went to one meeting just because they were meeting on a night that I've had something, yeah, I don't remember, maybe it was ours, but anyway, so when I went up, we had toyed with a couple of different properties, and I said I would try to go to their meetings, but I think they all understood that we can't tailor this toward a specific grant because we're not guaranteed that grant. So I understand wanting to tailor it because they think they can get this grant, but long-term, I see it the same way that we set up the Friends of Hops, which is a separate entity, raising, donating with a plan. I mean, we even gave Mr. Fitzgerald a hard time about the garden for Peg because we've recognized that we need to make sure that we have maintenance, and so that would be a large cost, and we're not going to be able to fund extra people for the highway department, and who's going to be mowing it and doing all that? Like, it's bigger than what people think it is. I don't mean it in a bad way to say that, but
Well,
I'm sure they understand. But
I don't know whether they're going to bring a petition article in or not. They've got a couple more days to do so. I gave them the language I thought worked based on what the Stanton Foundation was looking for. We'll see if anything gets in or not.
well, perhaps they come before the board before they even submit the article so that we can explain to them, or they can explain what do they think the odds are for this Stanton thing, because if it's not that high, then we need to say, we don't really particularly like the way this is set up, and we don't have the resources. It's not that we don't want it, we don't have the resources.
I'll see if they're interested in coming.
I'm not going to speak to you guys.
No, that's a fair statement. We're in a squeeze, to your point earlier about we've needed an extra person on highway for some time now, and we can't fund that, and we're going to take on more jobs for highway. That makes no
Nope.
sense.
No, And the people have spoken about their tax bill, so I'm sure they'll understand.
Did you have a comment?
There was a survey, did the results of that come back? I don't know who was actually.
That was a group of residents, that wasn't
Yeah,
us.
it's a great idea. It's a great idea to have a dog park, and we could support that, but it has to be funded 100% and maintained 100% on volunteers. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure they understand, and they're a great group of people that are looking at it for sure, but they probably don't realize how limited we are for those resources.
It's 8:15.
But it's up to us to explain it to them. Hi, come on down.
8:15, yes.
Stacy.
I'm sorry, would you, for the record, would you want to give us your name? You swear to uphold the laws.
I do my best.
Stacy is here because she has so graciously agreed to come on the Holidays in Halifax Committee because she heard it
small
was
thing, by the way.
so much fun.
It is fun, but
Yes.
it's a job, it's work,
Yes, I told her she had,
planning and
yeah, she has to come up with a Christmas jingle.
just you.
Go.
You mean you haven't been doing it?
Acapella, by the way.
About it.
No, the fire chief is very excited.
Yeah.
And
Why?
Why? Well,
Why is the fire chief so
I'm new
excited?
to the area. Been with the bank now for about eight months in the town and want to get more involved in the community. We did a small little thing this past winter at Florida, and I think it was a big hit.
it was,
Yeah.
A little-
Absolutely.
We even made one.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I just think that this type of committee is up my alley I'm passionate about that type of.
Family activity.
Yeah.
And it's all
the
positive, it's
It's
all
holidays.
part of the
fun.
community.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's wonderful because from the first time that you walked in the branch, you've wanted to be part of the community, and it's not a little thing that you did on that night. I mean, you know, you were trying to encourage a lot of people to go back to the bank for their opening,
Let's take it.
but I mean that was a fun activity.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. It was a big success.
The Italian thing, you know,
Yeah.
hey.
Put 'em on. Talking about Christmas.
Well, volunteers are always welcome, and especially enthusiastic volunteers, and I think we'd be glad to have them.
Well, I think she sets a prime example for those of us who live in town, because Stacy doesn't live in town.
Right.
She's willing to volunteer to do things for the town. I think that's an excellent idea, and hopefully other people will step forward. You know, you set a prime example. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
I will make an motion that we appoint Stacy to the Holidays in the Halifax Committee without an expiration date.
Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
No, it's for June 30th, 2018, but we renew it every.
Okay.
So,
Do I have a
so
second?
just scratch that 2018 out.
I just made it a 3.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow. Both Troy and I will be in.
Yes.
I just want Tom to please.
Now, does that include the bodyguard too? Is that, the bodyguard gonna be involved?
Oh, you did? Did you think of the Yeah, I know I am. He's got glitter all over him, I can tell.
Good night.
Good night.
So Oak Street speed limit sign, we had a resident on Oak Street a couple of weeks ago who had contacted the Board of Selectmen's office about the speed limit signs on Oak Street. I guess there was a possible discrepancy about what should be there or what was there. I went out, I did notify the Traffic Safety Committee, I've gone out to Oak Street. There are right now no 35-mile-per-hour signs I could see in the stretch between Home Street and the Plimpton Town Line. There are thickly settled signs, one as you're entering Halifax from the Plimpton side,
yeah.
and one as if you've just turned right off of Home Street onto Oak Street, there's one there also. And that stretch between the boundary line and homes is legitimately thickly settled, meets the density requirements. So there's really no need to change the speed limit there. What I'm recommending, however, is that we, instead of just the plain thickly settled signs that we have there, to replace them with the hybrid signs that we've used in a couple other locations, which mention thickly settled, the speed limit, and then also stating the general law. I had contacted again the Traffic Safety Committee after I'd gone out there. I said this was my intention to recommend this to the board, and if they had any objections, they should contact me. No one's contacted me, so I'm recommending to the board that the signs be replaced.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Just on the Metro South Chamber of Commerce Legislative Luncheon, there's one coming up on March 20th at BSU. Featured speaker is the Speaker of the House, Robert Blair, and there's an RSVP by March 9th. I plan on attending that. I don't go to a lot of the Metro South meetings, simply time commitments and stuff. but-
Leo's a good speaker.
Yeah, and
Ba-dum-bum.
it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile hearing from him simply because, the way the legislature works these days, or has worked now for decades, hearing from him is a fairly good indication of what might actually be occurring up there. So,
If anything.
but the board individually is welcome to attend. I just need to get the RSVP into Metro South.
I've gone for the past couple of years. I'd like to go again, but certainly it'd be fun to have.
Yeah.
So Tom, yes,
I'm not able to, sorry.
It's on the 20th.
it's on the 20th,
Good time of day.
noon. That's why it's lunch.
Oh, is that why they call it lunch?
Yeah, it's an okay
I eat
lunch.
at 2
Let me
o'clock.
just check. I don't think I can, but
Yeah, I
And
gotta
it's
try.
under
I'll try to make
$450.
it.
Okay.
it's under 20.
It's under $4, actually.
I mean, I guess I could.
Chapter 70 lawsuit. I noted that the Worcester School Committee had indicated interest in joining the Brockton School Committee's planned lawsuit concerning Chapter 70 funding. This is sort of a remake of the lawsuits that were filed back in the beginning of the 1990s and resulted in a significant upsurge in Chapter 70 aid from the state after several years. What's happened, of course, since then, and Gordon rightly pointed out a few weeks ago, is that especially during the last 10 years, it's been a simple series of Band-Aids over whatever formula existed 10 years ago, and that the calculations used basically don't make any sense. That they're using bad data for the Chapter 70, but even more so, even setting aside that, it's inadequate. Definitely, given our situation, it's inadequate. What we're seeing is that the funding for our students, whether they're special ed or regular, is not matching our needs here in Halifax. I don't know that Brockton and Worcester have exactly the same set of problems that we do. They may be more affected by charter schools, for example, in those communities than here, but it may in fact make the lawsuit stronger to have a variety of cases. I'm not committing the town to anything. What I'd like to do, though, is contact the Brockton School Committee and find more information out about the lawsuit, and if they're looking for funding for some reason from any community that participates, what they'd be looking for. I mean, I don't think we can.
Maybe they could give us a credit
Yeah. Maybe, but I don't think.
I know you.
based on the
I
money.
don't know
we
that they,
spent.
I don't know if they want a free rider, but we'll see what they were looking for.
Okay.
If the board would permit.
For this case, I'm willing to work with them. Yes.
I would encourage you to investigate that.
Let's see, Mr. Cook's coming in at 9, so we'll go over that. Just so the board is aware, on the Mass GIS and 911, they had sent a note out to cities and towns ensuring that personal information is going out to them, and they supposed to do that on an annual basis. But there's also address information on particular parcels that needs to get out there, and the assessors are catching up on that request also. So that work's getting done with mention. Chapter 90 funding, we did get a letter from the state that the distribution amounts have been released, not the actual money, but we now know if the Chapter 90 bill is passed by the legislature and the governor sometime this winter, early spring, that would free up $269,439 for the town. It does require state legislation. We'll have an article at town meeting. We'll have the amount filled in. The only other thing will have to be filled in is the actual chapter of the acts of 2018, and if it's done by May 14th, we'll be able to do it. I've notified the highway department and the town accountant, and so we'll see what happens with that. Let's see. fiscal 19 budget.
Yeah, so Gordon was here,
Yes.
and I just sent him a text that I would like him to come back because I don't think I had him text me what happened,
Yes.
and Silver Lake did not.
Right, he mentioned that to me in the hallway.
Okay, so I asked him if he could.
Well, I'm happy to cut.
Well, only because we have 5 more minutes
Yeah.
before we have to see.
Well, yeah, and I've got a couple other things.
Okay, you don't mind.
On the selectmen's, well, let me go, I don't have any information on the school repair project or the pump house at this point on selectmen's policies. I didn't know if the board had a chance to review them during the last 2 weeks. If you want me to wait again, I'll wait again. don't
I
know
have
when I'll
not
be
because I
able-
was away.
Yeah. I mean, it's not urgent if the board wants to wait until 13th.
I've read some of them because I haven't read all of them.
Then I'll carry it over to 13th. Okay. Solar array right now on River Street, that's before the Conservation Commission. As we had talked about the Elm Street property, I'm still looking for public comments for that until March 13th. Mr. Rauro was here earlier tonight. Town councils continue to work on the host community agreement on 4 daughters. I am requesting the board open the warrant for the special town meeting with a closing of March 19th. This is the one that would be held on the same night as the annual town meeting.
So moved.
So I have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And near the end of today, I did have someone contact me about a possible zoning change for the town
Can I just call Gordon? I'll be back in the room.
to allow recreational marijuana establishments in the commercial district. It's something obviously we had the hearing back last spring about having recreational marijuana in town, and the original article and the article that went to town meeting allowed it in the industrial. This is both all for cultivation and for processing and for retail, but it was only going to be allowed in the industrial district. I know 1 or 2 members of the planning board at that point indicated an interest in adding the commercial district, but since the article that had been brought to them was limited to the industrial, and that's how it was going to town meeting, we stayed there. This isn't from the planning board, this is from somebody else who's indicated possibly they want to have an establishment in the commercial district, but that would require a zoning change.
Yeah, well, did we vote at one point to only have it in the industrial area?
As a starting point, but the town meeting could change that. So if someone brought an article to town meeting to make that change, town meeting could say yes.
To be honest with you, I wouldn't feel comfortable with supporting that.
Well,
It's one of the things we're trying to do is to keep it out of the middle of town, make it more accessible. If it's in the commercial, and we had commercial all of 106.
Well, it's not there yet. I mentioned to them that if they wanted to get it in for this town, the annual town meeting, they'll have to have a petition article, it has to be in by Thursday. So we'll see if they get something in or not. But I did want to give the board a heads up about that. I'm still working on the zoning bylaws. Rob had provided a couple of possible changes, minor changes, typos and such, that we wanted to get up to date on. I'm going to try and have something before March 13th because we're going to start, I need to get stuff to the planning board sooner rather than later for hearings and enough time for them to make recommendations and such. But I'll be working on that. I'll wait for Kim to come back because I do want to talk a little bit about the fiscal 19 budget. I know we had the discussion last night upstairs with the Finance Committee, but I had reviewed some numbers with Kim and with Sandy Nolan, the town accountant.
Yeah, I was reading what you written down.
And wanted to go over that as a possible example of how to construct the FY19 budget. It's not the only way, but it is a possibility. So I'll wait for if the board wants to do this. I don't know if the board wants to take a couple more. Well, what I would recommend is maybe the board take a recess until Kim comes back, redo our 8:30, and then I don't think that's going to take 15 minutes, and then we could revisit the fiscal 19 budget.
I don't even know when he showed up. Won't even take 5 seconds.
He likes to talk with y'all.
Yeah, let's take a brief recess for 5 minutes. Are you good with that, Fred?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. We're going to take 5 minutes, folks. Very quick 5 minutes. We're back, and we're back in session. It's 8:30, and we're going to ask Mr. Bergstrom to come on down. It's spelled out for me right there.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. Good evening. Hi.
So Mr. Bergson's in to request a live entertainment permit for the next edition of Mudfest on June 10th. I don't know that you're asking for any changes in the stipulations at all.
Absolutely not.
Okey dokey.
Pam has provided each of you a copy of the last permit with the stipulations, so if the board wanted to approve it based on that previous permit.
Yeah, the fire chief was fine with the stipulations. I didn't hear back from the police chief. I'm sure he was fine with it, and Board of Health was fine.
No, I did get back from the police chief.
Oh, you did? Okay.
He
great.
said everything was.
Is it still in there that I can drive one of the mud buggies?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's an arrangement you have personally.
And there were no incidents, so it seemed to work out.
Okay, so I will make a motion that we approve the live entertainment permit for Mudfest event for Sunday, November 12th, 2008.
No.
Oh,
June 10th.
oh, June 10th. Oh, I'm looking at the last year's permit.
Yes.
June 10th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with the following stipulations: 6 detail police officers for the entire event, 1 ambulance with 2 EMTs for the entire event, 1 force unit with 1 firefighter for the entire event. Must clean Hemlock Lane of debris after trucks have left. Please submit diagrams of parking areas, spectators areas, access and egress zones. 75 vehicles allowed, which is limited to trucks, Jeeps, and ATVs. License holder shall confirm the amount of earth that will be disturbed and whether NDEPS permit will need to be obtained. And H, no amplified music after 6
No, it's
p.m.
gonna be 5. It was
5
6,
p.m.
because I think it was
All right.
6.
We ran 6, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
We left it open for our June one, we always ran it a little later, but 5
It's 5 o'clock.
Okay.
I changed it to 5.
Yeah, because November is getting
Okay.
dark early.
Yeah, it's getting dark early, so we're going to leave it at 5 because we
Five,
usually
good.
break every single truck by 3.
Okay, coolio.
You got a lot of light up.
So you guys can sign this.
I hope we have the same lineup we got in November. We have to
Sign that.
One.
You got the front.
be walking everywhere.
So I did a motion.
Second.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
See how quick that was?
Painless.
We're easy breezy.
Easy
So what did that
breezy.
lady do? I missed it.
What lady?
The young lady that was here that signed up for the board. She works for which bank?
Rockland Trust.
Rockland Trust
Is that a new
Manager.
Rockland Trust Manager?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she's awesome.
Julie's gone.
I know, she was awesome.
That's it.
Okay, that's it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Bob.
you can come back, whenever, I get
Yep,
a
you'll
copy
do
now,
your
but
thing
I'll
with
call
it.
you and I'll just
Yep.
let you know, I'll send you a
Absolutely.
text. I mean, an email.
Shall we?
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Nice to
I
see
like the
you.
new look.
Thank you. This is a midlife crisis. I'm
Really? How's it going for
I'm
you?
turning 50 in April.
Shut up.
You're just a kid.
Yeah. 50.
50 is nifty. Bob, 50 is nifty.
Isn't 50 the new 30?
It's nifty.
No,
It's
that's
nifty.
70.
No, that's
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Okay, so fiscal 19 budget, the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen held a joint meeting last night with, probably 30, 40 people in the audience of town departments, town employees, and various residents to talk about the fiscal 19 budget. I don't know, do you want me to start with Silver Lake? Do you want me
I
to
think we
start?
need to do an update on Silver Lake because it could change our entire discussion.
So, when we had our discussion last night, we were hoping that Silver Lake would approve a budget that was $400,000 less than what the original proposal, they hadn't voted on the original proposal, but the one that was brought to the board, to the school committee back earlier this month, was at a level that I don't think any of the 3 communities thought was sustainable for those towns. So the committee gave instructions to the administration and principals to try and come in with a budget that was $400,000 less than the original proposal. My understanding from you and from Gordon is that the budget that was brought in tonight was $291,000 less.
Yes, and Paula Hatch, the chair, who was in attendance of our meeting last night, explained that, this is all according to the book of Gordon, I was not there.
Right.
Explain that, you know, we needed to go, they needed to look at their budget again and go further. So let's talk about what they reduced. According to Gordon, they reduced the number of health insurance, which goes more in line in what the number that just came out. And the other thing they reduced is they put, this makes no sense to me because this should have been in the original proposal, but something about they put the steps and lanes, okay, so they cut 291,200 was the reduction of salaries and insurance, which actually put people in the correct step and lines for next year. So was their first version not having people in the correct step and line?
If I went by what Gordon's saying, yes, I think I want to check with Sandy. I think I need
Yeah,
to check with
that's a
her.
little strange that you would.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It makes no
Basically,
sense.
the numbers that they had originally 3 weeks ago were incorrect.
So then that's not really a cut.
In essence, no, because they're not losing anything.
Right.
Correcting it.
Exactly. So all the programs that they had, this is not a level service budget as we had asked it to be. According to the book of Gordon, who was there, Paula did try to advocate for our community. Our two other representatives did not, but those were the two representatives that did not attend last night's budget meeting for whatever reason. If they couldn't make it, I would have appreciated them letting us know and asking, you know, what the state of their union is, since they do represent the taxpayers of Halifax, and their decision should be based on what our affordability is, in my personal opinion. And if they were sitting right here, I would say it to them. So I'm extremely disappointed in those two representatives that don't even know what our town needs right now, but has made a statement at that meeting that they will just try to convince the town meeting to go with the number that's printed for Silver Lake. So there doesn't seem to be an appetite, according to Gordon, that that number will be lowered any further, because the representatives from Plimpton and at least one of our representatives stated that they would make an impassioned plea to town meeting to support this number and not have any further reductions in that budget, which puts us in a very difficult position, more difficult than we were even in yesterday. So it's sort of thrown us off our game, or me anyway.
Well, I have reached out to my colleagues in Plimpton and in Kingston. I'm waiting to hear back from them as to where they're standing with the Silver Lake budget.
I did ask Gordon if there was a representative, I mean to interrupt you, Charlie, but I did ask Gordon if there was a representative from Plimpton there, and there was, but they have no idea where they stand.
Because I might hope, you know, maybe unrealistically, that if we want to go at the we had asked for the well, first of all, even the 400,000 level was not
Really?
what Gordon had asked for back several weeks ago. It was basically picked up by the school committee based on a representative from Kingston mentioning that, well, you know, maybe we'd be accepting of a cut of $400,000 and we could approve a budget that included that. So they went with that. But we don't know really what the Kingston, either the Finance Committee or School Committee, and either communities, Board of Selectmen or Finance Committee, and either communities are willing to support or not support. My hope is perhaps, maybe unrealistically, that if as much as maybe we can't get any lower than 400,000, that if we pick 400,000, we're hoping that another community will buy into that.
But the problem is, Charlie, we have to plan that we don't.
Well, I understand that. Well, we have to have two scenarios, one in each case. The difference for us, we had asked, let's say when we ran numbers earlier today, we assumed a $400,000 decrease in Silver Lake. This isn't a decrease in their budget from last year. This is a decrease from $400,000 from what their original budget is for fiscal 19. It's not meaning a decrease from fiscal 18 to fiscal 19. It means an increase in our assessment. They'd run, and that meant if they dropped 400,000 based on their breakout of the percentages for each of the communities, it's 32% for us, which is 128,000. Dropping it to 291 instead of 400 means we have to come up with about another $35,000. It's certainly possible to do that. It makes things very, very difficult because right now, the scenario I envisioned with a $400,000 budget left about $1,000 available to do anything. I would still like to go to the Finance Committee with this scenario.
Sure.
But to supplement it with a possible scenario, I think we have to look at it and figure something out that says, if we can't get another community to say, to be with us on a $400,000 decrease, and as much as we might want more, it may be unrealistic to think that any of the other two are going to say yes to a lower than 400,000.
Sure.
Is to come up, with two scenarios, one to say, so there's a 400 drop, and one that says there's a 291 drop. One of the things, I realized tonight when we were talking about this, I'll get to the scenario in a minute, is Paula mentioned that she was hoping that the town of Halifax was not dropping everything on Silver Lake in terms of budget cuts. And the thing about this is, what the Silver Lake budget represents now is an increase in programs and services, unlike Halifax Elementary, unlike the rest of the town. It represents a 2% at least increase in wages across the board, along with steps for Silver Lake. Again, the scenario I envision, at least on the, it gets complicated at the school because they've already signed a contract, but it would only provide sufficient funding for steps in one there, along with steps in one for the union and non-union on the non-school. So if anybody thinks that we're picking on Silver Lake, they're the last people who are getting picked on. They're the ones who are going to come out of this best out of all the town departments.
Absolutely.
Even under the 400K scenario.
Absolutely.
So in terms of when we were talking about this last night, we need to pick and choose basic priorities. And I'm not saying police versus fire or highway versus water or anything else. But my intention in working this example out was to say, I want to maintain the same level of services that we have now. Most of our money goes to people. It doesn't matter whether it's school or non-school, and that's where most of our money goes to. I mean, we've got things like the debt and such, but those are ones that we're going to have to pay whatever. But our variables are whether or not we employ personnel and how many hours we employ them. And what I wanted to do was to say, let's maintain the number of people we've got, the number of hours they're working, starting that off as the most important priority and working from there. And saying, let's start off with the fiscal 18 budget. Whatever we appropriate for a department, we start there and work up, rather than what the department's requested, whether it's Silver Lake or any other department, and work down. Because what we're doing there is saying, if we're doing an across-the-board decrease for all the departments based on their fiscal 19 requests, that penalizes the people who didn't ask for any more money. And helps the people who did ask for more money, even though they may be providing different levels of services. So in trying to match revenues and expenses, and I don't know how much you want me to talk about each of the individual things, because we had some television here last night, but it starts off with using the approved budget from fiscal 18. If an expense line item is less for 19 than it is for 18, and we have fewer of those, if that's the case, we'll use the fiscal 19 budget number. So if somebody had 2,000 for fiscal 18 and they went down to 1,800 for fiscal 19, we drop it. Just the fiscal 19 wage line items based on step increases. At school, non-school. If someone was supposed to get a step increase at the school, we'll fund that. If they're supposed to get an increase in the fire department or highway, they'll get that. That's not the general wage increase. That's simply a step increase, whether it's a wage and personnel, a union contract, either at the school or non-school. Put those in there. And what I tried to do as well as I could was go over the elementary school budget to figure out what those step increases would be. I'd be happy to go back to the school administration and say, I want to make sure my numbers are correct. I think they should be fairly much in the ballpark. There may be a couple of tweaks that I've missed, but they should be in the ballpark. There are line items where we're required to pay money. We don't really have any choice. Debt, as an example, is number one. But things like the health insurance budget, we're required to fund as long as we have those employees and such. Make adjustments on that basis. Some of those budgets are going to have to increase no matter what we do. Then what I said, I have a long note about the enterprise funds. There's one of the things about enterprise funds is that the revenues and expenses for those departments are the same. So if you cut $1,000 out of an enterprise fund line item, you cut $1,000 of revenue. It doesn't change any of the other budgets. No other budget gets that $1,000 simply because we cut $1,000 of the enterprise fund. The same is true as you raise it by 1,000. No one loses 1,000. We have specific revenues for the enterprise funds, which are water, the solid waste and recycling, and cable. There are only 2 line items in the enterprise fund outside of wages that were made requests to go up. One was cable, and that's simply a pass-through. It's a significant increase, but it's a pass-through based on the receipts that we're getting from Comcast. That money can only be used for Area 58. We can't divert it and pay for street sweeping. We can't divert it and pay for police overtime. So I've, in fact, increased that line item based on what we are going to need to set aside for cable. It may be a lot of money, but the money's there and it can't be diverted for another use. The only other line was recycling, where because of the market conditions for recyclables, the cost of disposing of those recyclables has gone up. We have money to pay for that specifically from recycling revenues. It can't, again, be used for something else. And so I've made adjustments on those 2 line items for increases. If someone said, okay, let's level fund the recycling line item for disposal costs, it's right now 28, they're asking for 34. Let's say we stay at 28, 2 things happen. The $6,000 doesn't go someplace else. And 2, they're going to run out of money in May because of the market conditions. They have to pay a certain amount per ton to get rid of the recyclables. And if they run out of the money in the middle of May, we're simply going to go back to the reserve fund because we've got to run the recycling program. Those are the only 2 places I made adjustments for on the enterprise fund outside of the wages for the cross-the-board increases. As we talked about these, there's an assumption of a $128,000 decrease in the Silver Lake assessment for Halifax. That's based on a $400,000 decrease in the budget for Silver Lake. We'll have to do a different scenario based on a 291, but like I said, I think it's going to be as equally important at this point to be in communication. The Finance Committee needs to be out there talking to its colleagues. I think the board and myself need to be talking to our colleagues because I understand that the financial positions of Plimpton and Kingston may be different than ours, but long term, we're all headed in the same direction. You might have a lot of money left on the table in those committees, but this is a wonderful way of using it up and not having that option in future years because it's never going to get any better than it is right now. I did make a few other adjustments based on the information that was brought to the elementary school committee a few weeks ago. One is that we need to project an additional vocational education student above what was originally projected. That's $30,000. I've added I reduced the special ed budget by 26 because they're going to project a percentage of the circuit breaker revenue coming back in. They get reimbursed at a certain percentage. The administration thought that the percentage that they could project it at was higher than originally projected. That, in essence, decreases the special ed budget by 26. Obviously, that's a good thing. But also, they said they need to put in $30,000 for sick leave buyback and longevity stipend increases at the elementary school. So that went back in. So I've included those changes. I've made sure that all the increases, both for the special education budget that for students there at the elementary school and for the out-of-district placements are included in the budget. It's a mandatory cost that we have to bear. We've had a policy for a long time with the elementary school that they don't bear that burden. If we have a $100,000 student that walks in the door, they're not going to have to cut the elementary school budget by $100,000 on the regular side to make it up. Everybody shares that burden. It doesn't mean that they don't have any cut because of that, but we're not saying it's your school budget and you're stuck with this. At the same time, if there was ever, which doesn't happen very often these days, there was a special education surplus, it needs to come back to the town. If we're going to fund your deficits, we get back the surpluses at the same time. On the revenue side, there's no change in local receipts. We're going to use the governor's budget for the cherry sheet state aid numbers, and we're going to have $80,000 in new growth, which is lower than previous years, but that's the amount the assessors think is a reliable amount. What that means is we've got about $24.5 million in gross revenues. We've got 24.2 if we leave $300,000 on the table. What we've tried to do this coming year and in past years is not sock it to the taxpayers to the last dollar. That even though it may end up being only $100 per household, that we're not taxing to the full amount that we could legally. There's some psychological reasons for doing that, to communicate to the taxpayers that, we understand the fiscal burden they're going to be under, especially even with not taxing the full levy. They're going to get 5-6% increases, something on that order, I think, for property taxes. So, and most people are not seeing their revenues go up that much, but because we've added the fire suppression system, we're adding the Council on Aging, we're adding the roof, siding, doors, windows projects to the tax burden, we're going to see increases in taxes this coming year. But what that does is, for leaving $300,000 on the table, our adjusted revenues are 24.2. If I throw in $125,000 for the reserve fund, $100,000 for the overlay for abatements and exemptions, and $10,500 for the tax title, the expenses become $24.1 million, just a little bit more than that. And it leaves about $84,000 available for any increases, whether it's expense budgets or it's for across-the-board increases, school, non-school. Well, it just happens that a 1% increase for everybody at the elementary school, here, union, non-union elected officials, is $83,000. That means that not changing any expense budgets other than the ones I mentioned, but doing everything else I mentioned, we can afford a 1% increase for everybody. At the elementary school, that's going to be a tough situation for them, because I'm suggesting to them that they're going to have to make some difficult choices there, in that I don't want to give them all the money that they would need for a 2% increase, which is what they've approved via contracts there. On the other hand, they have the freedom within their school budget to make the changes necessary. So either they can cut an expense line item to help fund this, or several line items to fund this, because they'll need to find another $35,000 to fund an additional percentage over there, or they're going to have to cut back on personnel there. They'll make decisions and work that out. On our end, what I'd be going to everybody, whether it's unions, non-unions, everybody, wage and personnel, is that we can afford a 1% increase in this. That's where we're at. If the town as a whole, or the finance committee, or the board of selectmen, or anybody else says, well, I think the priority should be this. For instance, I think the priority should be 2% pay increase across the board. You'll need to find another $83,000. That means either A, you're going to cut expense budgets by $83,000 someplace, or you're going to cut people. In essence, what you're going to do is throw grandma off the sled, let her be eaten by the wolves, so that everybody else survives. If we do 1%, then
I want to be eaten by a wolf at this point.
But if you want, we get everybody to stay on the sled if we do a 1%. You got to throw somebody off if you want to do 2%. Or you have to cut an expense budget or expense budgets by that amount to fund it. Or maybe you feel that an expense budget needs an increase. Well, again, let's say that you want $10,000 for line item X. Well, you got to find another $10,000 someplace else to cut. You have that balance. And I understand there's going to be a temptation to dive into that $300,000 that we have on the table that we're leaving, so we're not taxing the tax rates. But I think both previous months and the meeting last night, and it wasn't just the residents saying this, it was the town officials saying this also, is there has to be a priority on that list that says, we understand the burdens that the taxpayers are facing. We can't stop the tax increase, but we're going to do everything we can to minimize it. It may not seem like that, but we're going to try and do something at least and leave that money on the table and not tax to the full amount. And the second reason for not doing that is as we talked about, doesn't necessarily mean that next year's going to be any better. If it comes out with special ed, for instance, that jumps another $300,000 next year.
And the budgets for the schools jump the same percentage.
We're going to need to have that ability to be flexible and to fund things we're mandatory under obligation to fund.
But at some point, we're going to run out.
Right. So what my intention, with the permission of the board, is at least bring the first scenario, which is the $400,000 Silver Lake scenario, to the Finance Committee for Monday's meeting to say, I'm not saying to you that this is it, but I'm saying to you that this is a way of, these are your priorities of making this happen. You may choose different priorities, you may choose different decisions, but here's the reality, which is, if you do choose, you're going to make cuts someplace else to balance what increases you want. On the $35,000 for Silver Lake, I think it's as I mentioned, I think we need to be more communication with our other two communities, and at the same time, to keep running these numbers, and if we can sharpen the pencils again and see if we can find $35,000. I'm not saying we can. I'm just saying.
Oh, no, yeah, we're going to find it in personnel.
Well, I don't know. We'll see.
Budgets again, and everything.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we still have 2.5 months before town meeting. There are questions, some of them on the good side, some of them on the bad side. There are always still some possibilities. For instance, there may be at the state legislature, when the House and the Senate come out with their budgets, that we end up with a little bit more money. The thing is that we're at a point where if we got another $20,000 out of state aid, that's great. That makes a significant difference. Even though it's 0.1% of our entire budget, those are the numbers we're talking about right now. Those are the things that can make a difference. If, for instance, our ambulance receipts come in healthier than they have been, that we can in fact nudge up the local receipts a little bit to cover that 35. We all may be unhappy that the result is that Silver Lake gets a budget that's only cut $291,000 because the other two communities
Because they keep
won't
growing and
agree.
growing,
Right.
and we're cutting to accommodate.
But as much as we're unhappy with the environment, we at least have a way of surviving for another year.
Right, but it gets back to the conversation that we were able to have with the Finance Committee after the meeting, well, we were still on camera, but about something has got to give. We can't keep sustaining this kind of thing. Again, it's not SPED's fault, but we need to look at the way that we deal with SPED, because we can see that going up, and even with the stabilization account, it doesn't help. And we've been able to hold this commitment for 15 years of, we want to hold you harmless, and we have sacrificed certain services in order to accommodate so that the education of the children are not affected. But I see clearly that we may not be able to do that next year. We may need to make some tougher decisions, and it bothers me that we have Silver Lake not really looking at the condition that Paula did put in a plug today to do what we had asked. But I don't have the commitment from the people who represent us that are advocating and saying the Finance Committee doesn't tell us how to run the budget. It's not a child telling an adult, I'm not doing it because you told me to. Like, this is real stuff. Like, we are trying, it takes a village, and I know they hate when I say that, but it does. We're not going to have seasoned firefighters at the fire department bringing these kids' grandparents to the hospital. I mean, this is real stuff.
And I apologize for my...
Sorry.
Are you completely... Sorry.
Okay. You gotta go.
I
Sorry.
apologize for going way over.
In mind.
We'll continue our conversation, but we do have the 8:45.
No, I needed to be shut down, honestly, because
I need to shut up too.
Yeah.
I didn't even get a chance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to even comment on that.
I'm so disappointed.
We're very late for Kimberly and Mahoney. We apologize. If you wouldn't mind coming up front.
Did you bring the dog?
No.
It's okay.
And Noreen is not here?
Right, she has the flu.
Yeah, and she,
Good place for her not to be.
yeah, so I spoke with Noreen, and she has given me her recommendation.
So we're still holding a formal hearing, so if, Pam, if you could swear in that.
If you could just raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, during the proceedings as well? Yes. Thank you.
So, Kim, do you want to go over?
Sure.
Details.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me just get to the scenario. So you are the owner of the dog?
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. According to the statement from Noreen, the victim said that the dog was loose and barked at him when he crouched down and bit him on the left arm in front of the Silver Lake convenience store. The dog owner said he got loose when the metal tether snapped. So, as Noreen explains to me, the owner, Kim, works at the liquor store. The dog broke its leash and ran to the liquor store and was outside when a patron came in front of the liquor store. The dog was barking. He bent down, and then the dog lunged on him and bit him in the arm. And Noreen also explained that that dog did not have a dog license, nor was that dog vaccinated for rabies, which is not a very good thing.
Right.
So perhaps you could give us your explanation of the whole event.
Before we go any further, are you in fact a resident of the town?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to establish that. I didn't think
I live right next door to
I assumed you were close when
And I
you description of the dog animals, but
I do believe that Noreen wrote you a citation for not having a dog license or having a rabies vaccination.
I walked over to the store to buy something, and the dog, I put her outside as I was going to the store because she had already broken her other kibble. I didn't buy a new one yet, and so I put her outside on her leash and attached it to a pole that I have outside so she could use the bathroom, and so she got outside because she was in the house all day. And I think she saw me walk over to the store and just kind of freaked out, and because she was already scared because she knew she wasn't supposed to be off the leash, because she knows she's not supposed to be off the leash. She saw somebody and kind of panicked, and he crouched down to try and like call her over, and she just was scared. I don't know. She has a tendency to be a barker and come across as mean, but she's just trying to protect the kids in the house. So why she did what she did, and why I don't have the shots is just because her behavior when she's around other people outside of the house since I've had the baby is now 1.5. It's changed. She got really protective of my son, and now she's just very protective. Anybody that walks by, she barks and makes a lot of noise, but typically I never let her out of the house or off the line. She just happens to snap off like that.
Well, first of all, it's irresponsible to have a dog that's not vaccinated. It's the law. And if you're going to have a dog, then you need to license the dog and take care of the dog and make sure that other people are protected from that dog. And if your dog is exhibiting those sorts of behaviors, it is your responsibility as a dog owner to get the dog training so that the dog does not have that behavior. Because now we have a victim who has been bit by a dog that hadn't been vaccinated properly. So that is not a good thing for this community. And you had a dog that had previously broken its leash, yet you left it alone and it broke a leash a second time. That is irresponsible behavior on your part.
The second time she didn't break it.
It doesn't matter, she got loose.
Okay.
There's no excuse for it
Okay.
at all.
I understand that.
I have little patience for this situation, let me tell you that.
Okay.
I would have the dog euthanized. That's what I have to say.
what was the recommendation from the animal control officer?
Well, the animal control officer was not exactly thrilled with the way that the dog had exhibited. She had noted that the dog could be quite aggressive. and was not comfortable with the dog's behavior, and had sternly said that if we were not going to do something about this dog, that this dog would need to have a kennel built that had a top and everything built around it so that the dog could not get out on for any reason. I'm really bothered by this. I really am very bothered by this.
Where do we go from here, I guess is...
Well, I've stated what I think, but, and that, Noreen said, do you have a kennel? Are you planning on making a
I have
kennel?
three-sided kennel. I just don't have a piece of fence for the fourth side, and I don't own the place I rent. And I'm in the middle of trying to move, so I had no intention of adding on to anything because I won't be there much longer.
Has the dog got his rabies shots at this point?
I was waiting to see what was going to go on with this meeting in particular, and I have been speaking with the woman that works at the vet, and I told her after this I would contact her to make arrangements to bring her in after hours or something so that it wouldn't be too much for the dog or for the people that work at the vet. I have a muzzle and I bought a new line, it's solid chain from Tractor Supply. It's like links as opposed to what else she was on so that she can't break it. I have no intention of her getting off the line again, but...
Has the dog ever bitten anyone before other than this time?
Yeah.
No one in your house, no visitors?
She's gotten aggressive and snappy, but she's never actually bit someone. I think in her own mind, because she knew she wasn't supposed to be off the line, because she knows she'll be in trouble for doing something like that, but she freaked out and panicked and bit the first person that she came in contact with. She's typically afraid of men in general. Why, I don't know. I think it was because her mother was aggressive and I didn't realize that it would be passed down to the dog.
And have you sought to have any kind of training to address this aggressive behavior since you have a 1.5-year-old?
The behavior, like I said, recently got worse as the baby got to be about 1. And the dog officer said that when the dog hits about 2, which he recently had, that's when they come into their own and to just keep an eye on it. And it's really, like I said, it's not towards the baby. If you see her with the baby, you think that they were like best friends. Or that they were like, they're inseparable. He can go in her food while she's eating, and she's not like that with anybody in the house. It's just other people.
How bad was the bite? I don't see the packet in this there.
Doesn't say, he says it went to the hospital, but it doesn't say how badly the bite was.
And what was the breed of the dog?
Pit Bull Terrier mix.
A Rottweiler, German Shepherd, and I guess Pit Bull and Boxer.
Good sized dog.
And again, I will go back to the training of if you have a dog that shows aggressive behavior, the responsibility of trying to tame that so that other people are not affected by it.
This is just my second dog, so that's just, I haven't really, this is my first real experience with any dog being aggressive, a second dog. My other dog was a beagle and wasn't like that, so I just didn't realize that I should be doing that.
So do you have friends and family come over and does the dog bark at them?
Not to my family. She'll bark and then she leaves everybody alone right after. She kind of just lets her presence be known. People she doesn't know, she gets like that. But I don't have a ton of people in and out of the house.
Right, but it must be pretty bad for a dog that's barely 2 years old to be so aggressive that you can't bring the dog to the vet. That's pretty aggressive.
I was afraid of how she would be around other dogs.
Right.
Now I'm afraid of how she'll be around people and the dogs. But
right. That's a problem though, don't you think?
I agree.
Yeah, that's a red flag, yeah.
I know, but she's like part of the family now too, so it's hard either way. I don't know.
Well, you got a choice to make. You can make a decision here. that we have the right as a board, if we consider the dog dangerous, and unfortunately, we don't have the dog officer here. You know, and I heard what my co-spirit says, but you got to determine whether or not, because if the dog is getting agitated at 2 years old and it does bite somebody serious enough to, we may wind up losing more than that. You may wind up losing and being sued. It changes the person does catch rabies and they have to go through the shots and stuff. There's a lot of things that comes with that. Now, have you had the dog since it was a puppy?
Yeah, 6 weeks. Like I said, when I first,
You've had it for 6 weeks?
no, when I had her since she was,
When she was 6 weeks old?
her mother, the dog's mother, was like growl or bite, but I didn't think that like emotional trait could be passed down to the puppies. And I've seen other things of her litter that weren't also like that, so I just think she happened to be one of the ones that got that trait passed down. But like I said, inside the house, with everybody in the house, you'd think she was a regular dog, but nobody else is going to see that but us. Everybody outside is going to see her being vicious and mean.
And that's what we have to worry about too. Not just inside your house, but we have to look at the liability of if we don't do something and somebody in our community gets hurt, then we have ourselves to look at because we didn't do anything to stop the behavior. And to me, it doesn't seem like you are interested in getting training or restraining other than a chain.
If I knew that it would change her,
But you don't think that maybe it will?
I don't know. I wouldn't. Like I said, it's my second dog. I don't know. I think she has the potential to be a good dog. Yeah, if somebody could break her out of that.
Right, but she needs somebody with experience in dealing with breaking that behavior.
Right.
One of the problems you have is that the dog's been isolated for such a long time, hasn't dealt with strangers or acclimated to people being around and other things. It has a tendency to be territorial no matter what happens with that.
Right.
And unfortunately, if she's 2 years old, that's a stage that would take a lot of training to break the habits.
Right.
And you don't seem interested in really doing much about a kennel.
For the time being, like I said, I'm trying to move like as soon as possible. So I'm not.
What is as soon as possible? What's the timeline?
Kennels are portable too. I mean, they're not necessarily fixed.
She has an indoor kennel and a crate, and like I said, outside she has the 3-sided one, and there's a gate that closes it from her ever going to the street if she's on a chain. So I have a muzzle for her now that I put on her before she goes outside or if anybody comes in the house. And it's one that is like a cage, so it gives her about 1.5 inches of space before she can't like bite anyone. She would just bark.
So how often do you bring her outside?
She goes outside to use the bathroom about twice a day since the quarantine. I used to leave her outside on the line for a couple hours a day. But since she's been on quarantine, it's down to like 5 to 10 minutes at a time, 2 to 3 times a day.
And do you have to be outside with her when she's out there?
According to the quarantine, yeah.
Yes. Have you been?
Yes.
Okay. And then how many more days do we have of the quarantine?
It's 4 months, so I have at least 3.5 months left.
And do you expect to be moving?
By the time 4 months is up, yes.
Are you leaving town?
Depends on what I can find that can fit my family. I have 5 kids. So it's been, and with the dog, it's even harder. But we're just trying to find some place that takes pets and that's big enough for the kids that I can afford.
I remember when I decided to run for selectman, I was approached by somebody who'd been a long-time selectman, and he said, "How much do you enjoy dog hearings?" And in truth, the dog hearings are really, you would think that they would be easy, but they're not. They're hard, but they are kind of clear-cut. I'm concerned about this animal. It's a large animal, it can do a lot of damage. maybe you don't have the capacity to do what you need to do with this animal. I'm not asking, I'm thinking through it. How comfortable are you keeping this animal? But the
I'm
potential...
tense myself because of how it's jeopardizing my ability to find a place, and I don't worry that she'll bite one of the kids. I do worry that she would bite somebody else, but I feel like I can control her myself, and I could do the training.
But with 5 kids, you're busy.
Right, that's the only thing.
Are you really going to be able to dedicate your time to it? See, that's the thing.
Well, the thing is this. You're looking for a place to move to. If the landlord finds out that you've got a vicious dog, and most people with a vicious dog are tends to bite, if they've got other tenants and stuff, then they got a liability.
Yeah, they're gonna have a problem with their homeowner's policy too.
A lot of places prefer that you insure the dog on your own.
Yes.
If you're even going to do it.
Yeah.
Yes. True.
I've considered it. I haven't looked into it, but I've considered doing that before moving, just to avoid the issue. But insuring a dog that has already bitten someone is probably tough.
Yeah, it starts to get to be cost prohibitive.
So your plan is for the next 3.5 months to keep the muzzle on him or her.
When people come around or when she's outside, yeah.
So part of your process is that you are the kids don't bring the dog out to the kennel, correct?
They can.
Okay.
How old are the kids we're talking about?
I have my 12-year-old, they're twins, they've done it. They can control her.
Since the bite, have they done it?
Not as often, but
They have?
every once in a while, yeah.
I don't feel comfortable with the 12-year-old handling the dog, bringing the dog outside.
I can limit that to when I'm at work, or I work right next door, but I can make sure that she only goes out when I'm there.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking. We haven't made a decision yet. We're trying to kind of work out different things. But my concern is you're at work, your 12-year-old goes to take the dog out, they're kids.
They don't unless I give them instructions. They won't just do it.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying, they're gonna try to put the muzzle on the dog, and then they're gonna try to bring the dog out, and if the dog has any chance to get to you, that's where the dog's going. And then we have another situation. So I'll look to see what Noreen said, the recommendation, but, in these kinds of cases, control over the dog is number one. And knowing that dog is being watched by an adult because it does have aggressive behavior is very important in this situation. And I would not feel comfortable having your children being responsible to bring the dog
My
outside.
other 2 kids are 17 and 18. Not that makes a difference, but if one of the kids takes the dog out, it could be them too. So I can make it so there's no kids taking the dog out, period.
I'd be okay with all of it if we had an enclosed kennel.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my big problems.
I can do it, like I said.
Usually, I understand there's a financial commitment there, but they are portable.
I'm surprised the victim isn't here tonight.
Yeah, I sent him a letter. It didn't come back.
Have you spoke to him? I know that he,
Yeah, I sent him a letter. I didn't send it certified. I don't have a reply.
Medical
yet.
report?
I don't have a,
No.
did you see how badly? Okay, could
Yeah,
you?
it's like a half-inch gash and like a maybe quarter-inch gash over here, but there was blood coming down, so it should have been bigger or smaller, but it was punctured on the ground.
Yes, because according to the victim, the dog leaped on him.
Well, he said, yeah, he
Yes.
crouched down
And knocked him
grabbed his
over.
arm down.
Yes.
That probably didn't help the whole situation, but
No, but he wouldn't have known that she was going
So the initial report from Noreen states reports he was bit by a dog went to the hospital, and they advised him to contact the animal control officer. He did. She logged all the information. Then the animal control officer, Callahan, was called by the victim saying that he was bitten in front of the 655 on Ponset and that the dog owner works at the package store. She had left a message for you with no response, and then she texted the animal inspector who said she would call in, and finally ACO Callahan interviewed the dog owner, and the dog owner said that Riley, her brown 2-year-old female pit bull shepherd mix, snapped her cable and came to the place of work. The dog owner stated that the dog was not licensed or vaccinated. So it doesn't really say how many stitches. It was enough that he went to the hospital.
Well, especially when you don't know whether the dog's been
Well, he,
vaccinated.
right, so I think the dog has to be quarantined. Is it 45 days or is it 4 months? You're saying 4 months.
She told me 4 months. She said 10 days before they can make any recommendations to have her licensed or vaccinated. And she said, you can go have her licensed, but you have to go to that town meeting. So I figured I would wait until after I come here.
Right, because you have to have a vaccination in order to receive a dog license.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so that's the process. So most owners would bring their dog to the vet, have them vaccinated, and then obtain a dog license through our town clerk's office.
We still don't know at this point in time whether or not he contracted rabies, the dog had rabies. That's what the 10-day span for,
Yes.
the gestation period, to see whether or not the dog, in fact, was or had rabies or the disease, and the person will change. That's why you can't get a vaccination until after the 10 days.
She contacted me after the 10 days was up. I said that that time frame was over. But she didn't show any signs. I don't know about the guy, but I mean, she doesn't have rabies, but I haven't heard anything further about him.
As much as I'd like to make a decision tonight, I really want to hear from Noreen, and I don't know how long that's going to be, you know, what her recommendations are on changes. I mean, my first gut reaction is that build a kennel, top and bottom, and have a muzzle, and the only person that should be dealing with is the adult. You know, and get a letter of warning that if the dog is found loose again or licensed, that you to sleep.
I'm kind of on the same page. I want to see a totally secure kennel, and I want you personally to be responsible for taking this dog in and out. The weather's gotten better now, so that the dog can stay out if you're at work, I'm thinking.
I don't leave her out
No,
without.
in the kennel.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Oh, I'm sorry to interject
No,
with
no,
you.
no, no. I'm saying, you know, if she has to.
I think this dog, because this dog has such aggressive a behavior, I don't think that it should be alone outside, even in a kennel.
No, that's fair.
Especially because if, at least for the 4 months, she's on dog arrest.
So, as of right now, add a fourth side to, I have it's a chain link enclosure, like I said, it's 3-sided. If I added 2 more posts, I can close it in on 4 sides, and it would be about 6 feet high, maybe 5.5 feet high.
Noreen
The
also
top one
wanted the
Yeah.
top.
Would be, I don't know how to do it, but I'm sure I can find a way to put a top over it.
Stretch chain link over it or something.
It's a really big space, I can maybe make it smaller.
Construction wire, if you can get all construction wire, that would be,
Sorry.
the construction wire, what do you call it, the mesh? Tom?
I'm sorry.
Construction wire, what is it, the mesh, the solid piece that they put down for the concrete lane?
You get gardening fence, there's chain link is relatively cheap. You could stretch it across and tie it off. I probably want to see chain link because it's a little smaller. But you know, kennels are tough too because they can dig and get under.
I could
You wanna get
keep
up
her
to
on
do-
the chain and keep her inside the kennels.
I'm going to go back to, think you're in over your head with this dog. I do.
I don't think
That's
I'm
my
in over
personal
head.
opinion.
Well,
Because if you had control of the situation, the dog would be vaccinated and the dog would have a license. And the first time the dog broke the chain, it wouldn't be loose the second time. That's my opinion. And you need to understand the situation and how serious it could have been. That person could have been mauled to death.
I don't see her potential to do that. I do see her potential. She got scared and she shouldn't bite, period.
Thank you. There's no excuse for a dog to bite.
Maybe that's the answer. Maybe it sounds like your life would be a whole lot simpler without the dog, honestly, as distasteful as that may sound to you. But especially when you're talking about trying to rent and bringing the dog, I know if I was a landlord, the last thing I want is somebody with a dog, especially a large dog that might have the tendency to be aggressive, regardless of whether you're carrying insurance or not. If somebody gets bit, they go after everybody, and that include the homeowner, whether you have a policy or you don't have a policy.
Yep. I mean, we could continue it for 2 weeks, but in the meantime, have the dog have muzzle until the 2 weeks and not be left outside except to you with them at all times to potty twice a day and go right back in.
That's agreeable.
Because
I can
I'm
live with that.
inclined to euthanize, but
Should I pursue licensing her and getting her vaccinated now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the rule. We can't tell you not to, but it doesn't mean it's going to save
You
her.
can't, and the dog must be under your control at all times, whether it's outside or inside. And if you're going to continue putting the muzzle on, but the dog has to be licensed and vaccinated. That's just the policy and the rule.
I'm kind of into, and unless you can have the resources to get the dog trained as well, I mean, it's almost like wasting money to.
So you have time to, in the next 2 weeks, to research finding a trainer that can come in or write a statement of their plan to train the dog so that when we re-meet in 2 weeks with the animal control officer, we can see how realistic the plan is.
Or you come up with some other plan,
The only other thing I've found online is that getting the dog fixed, which sounds to me like something that only would work with a boy dog, but getting the dog fixed would also calm the dog down. It didn't specify, it said spayed or neutered, so I wonder if that would be helpful on top of training, and I just have to look into how much that will be and if there's somebody that's willing to come to the house.
So I would take the next 2 weeks to find out about, as Tom suggested, to, edit that kennel to have a top and be fully secured. And I would contact a trainer and see what that entails and the cost of that and the time that it takes to train a dog. Because it's one thing to hire a trainer, it's another thing to have the time and the energy to do the homework to make sure that the dog is trained.
And the expense of it.
It's a lot. It's a lot. With that many, I know I raise a family, a large family, it's a lot. I mean, I'm lucky I have a dog that is, easygoing, but, she doesn't always sit when she's supposed to. So I understand the energy that it takes to do that. But in this case, you have an aggressive dog.
Kim, if I may, got to do some soul searching. You got the kids, you got the family there. You got to decide which comes first. Difficult. It's difficult anytime. I've been a dog owner my whole life, and I know how it is just to put dogs down that have reached that point. But at the same time, you've got to come to the realization that the kids are going to be there a long time. So the dogs are going to always be there. You can always get another dog.
And I've considered a lot of things. I just
Okay, well,
You'll have a couple weeks to think about it,
So,
and we will too.
so is the
Continue
board,
the hearing.
I know you're going to continue the hearing, it'll be for 8:15 on March 13th. Is the board giving any specific orders for the next 2 weeks?
The dog should be in your control at all times.
muzzle.
as far as the kennel goes, while the dog is out trying to do her thing,
She's with her all the time.
yeah, you're with her all the time.
And the muzzle must be worn outside. And when guests come over.
And the muzzle needs to what? Muzzle needs to be worn when?
When outside and when guests come to the house.
Dogs are funny creatures. I had one that was incredibly aggressive outside. If you were coming on the property, not off the property, but once you were in, he was fine. But they're always unpredictable, the bottom line. No matter what their behavior has been, it can always flash.
Because you wouldn't have predicted that he would have broken the thing, right?
So 8:15 on
Yeah,
March
you have
5th.
8:15 written there.
Yes, because that was the next appointment, because
Okay.
the solar array discussion's probably going to
Okay.
take a half hour
All
at
right, so,
least.
continued. Okay.
Sorry you had to be here. Sorry you had to be here.
That's all right. Okay, so who wanted to first and second?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Cook doesn't look
I
like
guess it was
It's not showing up.
Isn't that cooking?
Guess not. Or close the restaurant down early.
What do we have left? Just the
So I guess,
executive
well, I'm sorry to go back to the.
session? Oh, that's right, the budget.
So my intent, I guess there's a few things we could be doing, or I could be doing, or whatever combination. One is I still would like to go to Finance Committee with the first scenario, which is the 400,000 Silver Lake cut. I'll try and work out a second scenario that would say, even though we wouldn't support it, we might still vote against it at town meeting even, that we know eventually we might have to come up with the other 35,000 and put together a scenario that would allow.
Try to
for
find
that.
someplace
Yeah.
to find them.
I will try and stay in contact with my colleagues and try and find out where their towns are headed. At the same time, I'll ask the Finance Committee to do so at their level too. I don't know whether it's worth it at this point for myself or the board to send a note. I know to Silver Lake, I know the public hearing, obviously, on the budget is done, but
I thought they said we were going to meet again on March 8th.
well, they will, but they have a formal public hearing on the budget, which
Oh,
was
okay.
back at the beginning of the month. I see no harm in having us on the record, at least so that somebody, that no one can think that we're fine with this.
Right.
It may not change anybody's vote, but just as I mentioned weeks ago about the shared cost budget, that at least, there's some documentation that says, folks, this isn't going to work for us. We may end up having to do it, but what you're doing is putting all of us, including the elementary school, in a worse position by voting a budget that this high. We can't continue to afford a Silver Lake budget at this level. We understand the problems you have with charter schools and with Basics Chapter 78 not increasing at the same rate, and therefore the increases are falling on the communities. But we cannot continue as is in this way. There are macro things. I think we need to be pushing with the MMA more, with our legislators more about Chapter 70, about special ed, about charter schools and everything else. But the direct, immediate thing we can be doing is working on Silver Lake.
Well, and the thing that bothers me is what I said last night, which is when we assess our financial condition and we let people know this is where we stand financially, we can't grow departments, we need a level service budget. And back then, we thought we could afford
Even
a level service
right.
budget. But we continuously get budgets from them of with programs built in. And, it bothers me because years ago, sometimes the first draft would be a more reasonable draft. So when we were told last night and a number of times, this is just the first draft. Well, don't waste our time with the first draft because we build our budget based on that. And we're not guaranteed that number is going to go down. And if you have representatives saying, well, we're going to try to sell it to town meeting, knowing full well that their community can't support it, that's a problem, because it sacrifices everything else. And as we talked last night, we invited everybody in, so as a team, we could work out a solution. That, yes, we are the elected officials, and we work day to day with the budget, looking at things, and we know how things work. But we wanted to explain it to the department heads and our elected officials so they knew where we stood and that they could talk with us to work with us on a solution. And yes, Paula was great. She was hopeful that it could work out. It hasn't worked out, and we can't guarantee it will work out. But it's disappointing. I'm sorry.
What's more disappointing is that that $291,000 that they're offering to cut was apparently $291,000 that was oops in the budget. You know, that I'm a cynical guy, and as I've told everyone, I wasn't born a cynical son of a gun. I've evolved into a cynical son of a gun, and that isn't exactly the word I had in mind. But I find that very disturbing. I want some explanation about that.
And I think that they, a lot of representatives that serve on regional school committees feel that they're there just for the school themselves, and they're not. They're there representing their individual communities and provide the best education that their taxpayers can afford. And I know I keep saying that over and over again, but it's true. Everybody, like the police chief or the fire chief, if they wanted to just make a budget because they think this would be, the fire chief should come in and say, let's raise all the firefighters $20,000 so we don't have a revolving door. Well, that's really nice, but he recognizes we can't afford that. And so that's not something he does, because he is part of the team and he recognizes it and he completes his budget in a way that he understands.
Some of this comes from the autonomy, well, not autonomy, they don't have fiscal autonomy anymore, but they do in a sense, because they can propose any budget they want, and they only have to pass it, really. The way the system's built, it's very difficult to get inside the budget to give direction, and there is a mentality, I was on the regional school committee, there is a mentality that we are here for this. Our job, our charge is total focus on what we think would be an outstanding program. And yeah, wouldn't it be nice in a perfect world?
But this is the year of the need, not the year of the want. And I don't want it to be at a sacrifice. As we all talked last night, Charlie, I don't think your expense account has changed in 10 years, right?
I think the selectmen's expense account probably is less than it was 10 years ago.
Right, and so we've all done everything that we can in the name of education, to accommodate a Silver Lake assessment or to accommodate a SPED increase. We're trying to balance it all so that services stay the same, the education is a quality education, and eventually with this SPED thing, we're running out of time, and we're not going to have the levy left, and we're not going to have the money to make up for it. And we have minimum staffing in all departments. And we, like we said last night, the highway department's been looking for more help for, 15, 20 years maybe. And we have more roads than we had that long ago. And we thought this year could be the year that we could do it, and we can't do it. So,
You can't sacrifice the whole community for one thing.
I understand, but that's sort of...
Unfortunately, that's what we have to do.
Well,
That's where we're heading.
I had a discussion with a young lady, and I put it to her this way, and I'm having 4 kids going through the school system. I'm very aware of it. She felt that we were against schools and we weren't doing the right thing. So I asked her one simple question: how many kids do you have in the school system? She said, I have 3. I said, so what are your taxes, property taxes? She said, about $5,000, I think it might go up. I said, so you pay for 1/2 of one of your kids to go to school. What do you mean? I said, you're paying for 1/2. I said, if you can think about it, you're not even paying half of it, because you're paying 50% of that $5,000 for the school, 20% for the police department, another 20% for I said, that's how it's broken down. So other people in the community that are paying taxes are paying for your kids to go to school.
And we-
They might not be in the same circumstances that you are. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but at the same time, you gotta understand that there are people who don't have that kind of money to spend on the thing.
Well, that's always been the concept that, everybody's responsible for everybody, and that's how we build our communities.
Yeah.
And it's to everyone's advantage to have an educated group of people
Yes.
coming along behind us, and other people paid for us to go to school and all of that.
Pay it forward.
But it's gotten out of control. And we have to find a balance here.
And it's not that we don't, I'm impressed by the Silver Lake school system. I go to, I haven't gone as much the last year or so, but I used to go to almost every month to the Silver Lake school. Super impressed by it, something that we should all be very proud of. So I'm not suggesting that we not have a school that we're proud of. I'm asking what we've asked of every other department, which is right now we can't grow. We cannot grow a program. We need to maintain what we have. And please work with us and let us not have to cut anywhere to accommodate a growth that we can't afford. That's it. Okay, I'm tired, Charlie. So can I just ask you the process? So it gets a little complicated because I know you're going to go to the Finance Committee on Monday, but we're meeting with the school, the elementary school, at 6 o'clock on Monday. And the thought would be we were going to give them a little bit of direction.
I'm happy to send this to them and to say, here's a budget. It's not necessarily the budget because we don't know what the Finance Committee is going to recommend. We don't know what the town meeting is going to
Right.
approve.
Okay, so I guess you could send in the memo. I'm going to the meeting at 6 o'clock on Monday. I know Gordon's going to the meeting. I know you could have a conversation with
And
Gordon.
I also should be able to go as long as I just schedule my Monday to
Yeah.
be able to do that.
So that we can explain to them,
Don't have
because
to go
we,
to Albany again.
yeah, we did have 2 representatives from the Halifax School Committee, 3, because we had Alex. So Alex and Summer and Bob were there, and, they also came independently to a Finance Committee meeting a couple weeks ago, so they're certainly engaged in the process and understand the needs, and are concerned that they're going to be the ones that have to
Right.
have the brunt of the cuts. But I think your proposal is a pretty fierce proposal because everybody is treated equally. We're not going up on any, we're basically level funding as opposed to level servicing is really what your proposal
We're
is.
trying to level service as well as we can, given the constraints of the
Right, so it's sort of a combo where we're saying we're meeting our contractual obligations and those line items that we have no control over. And we recognize that Silver Lake has some of those line items, which is why they need to control new programs to accommodate that. And and I'll go back to when people retire, that should be recognized so that it can pay for those teachers that are on their way up the steps and lanes.
Not to create new programs.
Yes. So I know they're concerned, but I think this is a fair way of doing it. But what's the concept that we need to talk about the 1%? Because we need to get there, and I know it's getting late.
No,
But
well,
so in your proposal is a 1% wage increase for everybody but the school.
Well, it's everybody, including the school. The challenge for the school will be that because they have a contract that says 2%, they're going to have to find $35,000 in their budget to fund the 2% within their budget.
Okay.
They're going to have to cut $35,000, whether it's reduction in staff of some sort or reduction in expenses or whatever combination. Because they're obligated to pay the 2%. Because I don't see the teachers coming back to the bargaining table and saying, oh, okay, sure, we'll settle for 1. Unrealistic. But it's the numbers are going to be the numbers. And if you have a certain number of dollars and you've taken on these obligations, then those obligations are going to have to be met first, and you're going to have to cut back someplace else to meet that. And as I said last night, I don't think the contracts they've signed really are onerous in the sense of they're not a 5% increase, they're not a 10% increase. The problem is that we're in this place where even the difference between a 1 and a 2% is a difference of making ends meet or having to cut back. That's where we're at.
Okay. Do you find it's fair for 1%?
It's better than no percent.
Yeah, I think it's fair. No, it's not fair.
Okay.
But, no, it's not fair. It's not fair. If it's all we can do, it's all we can do. But let's take another look and see what else we can come up with.
Because the problem of going to 2 for everybody is I've got to find another $83,000.
Right.
Right.
And the sad part
Then you
about it
gotta
is
throw the
that
camera off.
much of what was said last night by the firefighters and the other people in the audience, the turnover cost us more, almost as a full person when you talk about equipment, talk about the training, talk about, the having the short shift, people working overtime, the cover shifts and stuff. It's a problem. It's problematic.
It's self-defeating.
It is.
It's self-defeating.
And let's be honest, as I said to some people who got in my face, I said, I was in personnel for a long time, got my degree in it, and I said, there are a lot of people that are like frogs. What do you mean by that? I says, they use this as a stepping stone to leapfrog up to the next position ahead. They get the training and everything, and we spend money on training and everything, then they leave.
Because they can get in
But they
here.
can get in here.
Because we're looking for new recruits
Yeah.
all the time. And to the greatest extent, we're not going to be able to change a whole lot of that. But we can change a little of it. We can't make it worse. That's my fear, that we have to stop at a point where we're not actually adding to the problem any more than we have to.
Well, the oxygen tent's getting kind of, it's getting low. Well, you want to talk about scheduling for negotiations?
Well, I can just do that with you. I don't have to do it.
Oh, I'm the only one that's doing this?
Well, Tom's already dealt his.
I have one.
Yeah,
23rd's good.
but we don't have a date. They haven't asked me for a date.
No.
Maybe we don't want to be there.
So I saw your little note.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
good.
That's good.
Okay.
Because I don't need to go in executive session. There's really nothing to go into on the negotiations, even though I put it on the agenda just in case.
So we can...
And there will be no questions or interviews after this meeting's over, right?
Yeah, was there anything,
Yeah.
are we covered?
I think that was everything, yeah.
Okay.
We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Tap dance, soft shoe, entertain.
I just want to hear second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor? All right.
That was
Thank
a
you, everyone.
vicious meeting.
Good night.